Okay, let's unpack this. We're diving into a story that feels, well, straight out of a high-stakes drama. A narrative where the fiercest rivals in an industry are actually considering putting down their swords to face a common, terrifying enemy.
It's wild, isn't it? I mean, imagine the absolute titans of India's telecom world companies that usually battle it out, like championship boxers suddenly talking about joining forces. We're talking Airtel, Jio, and Vodafone Idea.
Yeah, Vi too. And what's scary enough to potentially forge that kind of, well, unexpected alliance?
It's a problem they realize is just too big, too insidious to tackle alone. This relentless tsunami of cybercrime that is absolutely flooding the digital landscape.
A tsunami. That's a strong word, but it feels right.
Well, look at the numbers. As we dug into it for just the first 9 months of 2024, over 11,000 crore were lost to these scams across India. That's huge.
11,000 crore.
Wow. And tied to that, a staggering 1.7 million complaints filed in that same short period. This isn't just about losing money, you know. It's fundamentally eroding trust in the entire digital ecosystem that we rely on every single day.
Absolutely. So, our mission in this deep dive, to really get to the bottom of this surprising proposed collaboration, we need to understand just how massive and, frankly, how cleverly designed these scams have become.
Right. And explore what a united front from these telecom giants could possibly look like. What are the big challenges they face?
And crucially, why all of this matters so profoundly to you, anyone holding a phone right now.
Okay, so let's start by setting the scene, kind of painting a picture of the battlefield. India's had this incredible digital explosion, right?
Totally.
We've got, what, over 1.2 billion mobile connections now? Internet use is just soaring. It's a truly connected nation.
Which sounds fantastic on the surface, but what's become terrifyingly clear is that with this hyperconnectivity comes massive vulnerability.
Exactly. Those numbers you just reacted to are 11,000 crore lost, 1.7 million complaints just Jan to Sep 2024. It paints a pretty grim picture of the dark side of this digital transformation.
And the scams themselves, they're not basic anymore, are they? They seem to have evolved significantly.
Oh, definitely. They're much more sophisticated.
I've been hearing about these really chilling digital arrest scams. Can you describe how those work?
Yeah, they are particularly nasty. Basically, fraudsters impersonate police or CBI or some other official. They call you up, sound very convincing, very urgent,
Okay.
and they tell you you're implicated in some crime, maybe money laundering, maybe something else serious. They say you need to comply immediately, transfer funds or share details, or face immediate arrest.
Wow, that's pure psychological pressure.
Exactly. It's fear and urgency, psychological manipulation layered right over a technical scam.
And the phishing links, it feels like they're absolutely everywhere now, not just email anymore.
That's a key point. What we found is they're lurking on platforms like WhatsApp, Telegram, even Instagram DMs, places where you feel a bit more comfortable, maybe less guarded.
Right, places you chat with friends.
And these links are crafted to look incredibly legitimate. They might mimic your bank or a delivery service or some urgent notification. Super easy to click if you're not careful.
I know people who've unfortunately been hit by fake loan offers. They promise quick cash, seem too good to be true.
And they always are. These scams prey on people needing financial help. They promise instant loans, maybe ask for a small upfront fee or your bank details to process it. Then they vanish with your money, or worse, your banking info. We also saw loads of fraudulent payment pages. They look exactly like Paytm or Google Pay, pixel-perfect copies.
Scary, waiting for you to just enter your login or card details.
And the consequence can be devastatingly swift. Identity theft, bank accounts completely drained in minutes. It's brutal.
And then there's just the sheer volume of annoying stuff. The spam calls, the spam texts, unsolicited commercial communications, or UCC. Sometimes they even come from numbers that look like real businesses.
That's right. Scammers have figured out how to hijack legitimate business numbers, which adds another layer of deception, makes it harder to tell what's real.
So, pulling back, what's the key insight here? Why are these scams so successful?
Well, the critical thing that surfaced as we dug into this, so many of these operations work because they exploit the cracks, the gaps that exist between different service providers.
Oh, okay. Explain that.
A fraudster operating on, say, network A can easily launch attacks, send links, make calls targeting a user on network B or network C, and historically there hasn't been a unified real-time way to track that cross-network activity.
Got it. So each network might see a piece of the puzzle, but no one sees the whole picture instantly.
Precisely. And that gap, that lack of cross-network visibility and immediate response, seems to be the core driver behind this potentially game-changing proposed alliance.
Right, so let's talk about that proposal. When did this actually surface?
It was quite specific. On May 14th, 2025, Airtel put forward a really bold proposal.
A call for a united front.
Right.
From all the big telecom service providers,
Yeah.
TSPs, so Airtel, Jio, Vi.
Exactly. The core idea behind this Joint Telecom Fraud Initiative, as they're calling it, is real-time intelligence sharing.
Okay, what does that mean in practice?
The idea is for the TSPs to share information about known fraudsters, malicious IP addresses, dodgy links, suspicious call patterns, basically share threat intelligence as it happens.
So it's not just reacting after someone's been scammed.
That's the goal. Get proactive, ideally block malicious links and suspicious calls before they even reach your phone. Stop the scams in their tracks.
Now, this isn't the very first time we've heard talk of collaboration among them on spam, though, is it? I feel like there was something last year.
You're right. It builds on earlier ideas. Back in October 2024, Airtel had proposed a collaborative approach, but it was more focused just on UCC, those spam calls and texts.
Right.
They specifically suggested TSPs share details of the corporate connections used for commercial calls, like telemarketing lines, in a standardized format.
Why corporate connections?
Because scammers frequently misuse or hijack those legitimate business lines to make their spam look more credible. Sharing that data was meant to help flag fraudulent use faster.
Okay, so this new initiative feels like taking that earlier, more limited idea about spam calls and massively expanding the scope.
Absolutely. It's moving way beyond just blocking spam calls to tackling the full spectrum of telecom-based fraud, the phishing links, the financial scams, identity theft, all of it.
And how would they actually share this data? What's the mechanism?
Well, the vision includes a centralized data sharing platform. It's being conceptualized kind of like the distributed ledger technology, or DLT, system that's already used to regulate commercial SMS messages in India.
Okay, like a secure shared database, but for fraud intelligence.
Essentially, yes. The goal is complex, though. You need to monitor and combat the spam and the fraud effectively, but crucially, without accidentally blocking legitimate services. Think about your bank alerts, OTPs, food delivery updates. Those must get through.
That sounds like a tricky balancing act.
It is. And the real power, the game changer, is intended to be the cross-network coordination. If, say, Jio detects a large-scale phishing campaign originating on its network,
They can instantly alert Airtel and Vi.
that's the idea. So Airtel and Vi can then proactively block related malicious links or numbers on their networks too, even before they see direct attacks.
So that's how they address the exploiting the gaps problem head-on, by essentially stitching the networks together from a security perspective.
That's the hope. Create a more seamless collective defense against threats that, let's face it, don't care about which network you're on.
But still, this level of cooperation is, well, it's surprising, putting it mildly. Why now? Cybercrime's been growing for years. What makes this the moment these longtime fierce rivals are even considering this?
I think you hit it earlier. The sheer, undeniable scale of the problem in 2024 seems to have been a brutal wake-up call. Those numbers, the billions lost, the millions of complaints, they're just too big to ignore or handle individually anymore. It's become an existential threat, almost.
And the scams getting more sophisticated, using AI for convincing phishing, as you mentioned, that must play a role too.
Definitely. Criminals are innovating incredibly fast. They seem to be consistently a step ahead of individual company defenses. And the core issue just keeps coming back. They are actively exploiting the lack of coordination between the TSPs.
A fraudster on one network hitting a user on another.
Exactly. It highlights that individual fortresses, no matter how strong you build them, just aren't enough against an enemy that can effectively just jump over the wall using another network's pathway. So this proposed initiative is a direct response to closing those specific vulnerabilities.
It's truly remarkable when you consider their history, though.
Oh, absolutely. Let's spend a moment on that history, because
Yeah.
the rivalry between these three is legendary in Indian business.
It really is. Intense doesn't even begin to cover it sometimes.
Yeah. India's telecom market, for years now, has essentially been this three-player race: Jio, Airtel, and Vodafone Idea, or V.
Jio, backed by Mukesh Ambani's Reliance, just exploded onto the scene in 2016, right? Completely shook things up.
Totally upended the market. Aggressive pricing, free data.
Right.
It forced everyone else to react. Then you have Airtel, led by Sunil Mittal, the established giant, the veteran, often seen as the benchmark for network quality.
And Vi, Vodafone Idea. kind of the underdog now.
Yeah, Vi is the result of that big merger between Vodafone India and Idea Cellular. They've been constantly battling significant debt and fighting hard just to maintain market share. It's been tough for them.
And these guys haven't exactly been friendly neighbors over the years.
Far from it. There have been very public, often bitter disputes. Remember back in 2021 during the farmers' protests, Jio actually accused Airtel and Vi of deliberately sabotaging their network infrastructure in certain areas.
Oof, yeah, I remember that. Strong accusations.
And Airtel denied those claims vehemently, of course. Then you look at the spectrum auctions. These are critical events where they bid for the airwaves they need to operate. They're literally bidding billions of dollars against each other.
High-stakes poker.
Absolutely. In the 2024 auction, just look at the earnest money deposits, kind of a sign of bidding intent. Jio put down a colossal Rs 3,000 crore. Airtel Rs 1,050 crore. Alvire just Rs 300 crore. It really shows the difference in their financial muscle and maybe strategic priorities right now.
And even things like tariff hikes feel like strategic chess moves between them, don't they?
Oh, completely. We saw them all implement significant price increases in 2024, anywhere from 10% to nearly 27% on some plans. Part of that is needing to recoup the massive investments they're all making in rolling out 5G networks. But the timing and amounts are always watched closely for competitive signals.
Even smaller stuff can cause friction. Wasn't there a spat over satellite communication spectrum last year?
There was. In 2023, Jio and Vi were pushing for that spectrum to be allocated via auctions, while Airtel argued strongly for administrative allocation. Different approaches reflecting different potential strategies.
So this isn't just mild competition. It's been intense, sometimes seemingly hostile, to suddenly pivot and consider sharing sensitive fraud intelligence. It's a seismic shift.
It absolutely is. It really underscores just how significant, how maybe even existential this cybercrime threat has become if it's forcing this kind of unprecedented reconsideration of decades of intense rivalry.
But okay, let's say they do shake hands on the principle. Actually implementing something like this across three giant competing organizations sounds incredibly complex. What are the biggest hurdles they'd realistically face?
You've hit on the crux of it. This is far, far from a simple switch you just flip. The first, and maybe the biggest hurdle, is data privacy.
Right. That jumps out immediately.
You're talking about sharing sensitive network data. Potentially, this could involve customer-related patterns, traffic details, maybe even anonymized, but still sensitive info. Putting that on a shared platform, huge red flags go up instantly.
How do you secure that platform from the very criminals you're trying to fight and protect legitimate users?
Exactly. And how do you ensure that sharing fraud intelligence doesn't inadvertently impact legitimate enterprise traffic? Or worse, violate customer privacy regulations. It's like navigating a minefield.
Yeah.
You want to stop the bad stuff, but you absolutely cannot disrupt the good stuff, your bank notifications, emergency alerts, all that.
Okay, privacy is massive. What else?
Then there's the sheer logistical challenge. Just think about it. 3 enormous corporations, each with its own decades-old legacy systems, different technologies, different internal processes, different priorities.
And huge user bases.
Right.
You mentioned the numbers earlier.
Yeah, massive user bases. As of late 2023 figures, Jio had over 45 crore subscribers. That's 450 million. Airtel nearly 38 crore, Vi over 22 crore, trying to standardize data formats across these vastly different systems.
Sending them to talk to each other?
Aligning operational procedures for flagging and sharing threats in real time. That is an immense technical and organizational undertaking. It's not just plugging in a few cables.
It sounds like trying to build a single integrated security system for 3 independent countries using completely different languages and infrastructure.
That's a very apt analogy, actually. And layered on top of all that, perhaps the deepest, most fundamental hurdle, trust.
Ah, yes. The history.
After years, decades of intense, sometimes personal rivalry between the leaders and the companies, can they genuinely trust each other with this kind of sensitive fraud intelligence?
Will there be worries that one company might try to use the shared data to gain a competitive edge somehow?
It's almost inevitable that question would arise. And another point, given Vi's well-documented financial struggles compared to Jio and Airtel, do they even have the necessary technical resources and capital to fully participate in and maintain their end of such a complex, data-intensive initiative? It needs ongoing investment.
These are not small questions. It goes way beyond just the tech. It's about whether the organizational will, The capability and the trust truly exist across all three players.
Absolutely. But while this potential grand alliance is being debated and explored, Airtel hasn't just been sitting around waiting. They've been quite proactive on their own front.
Right, they've been pushing this idea of the safe network. What does that involve?
Well, they have been deploying their own internal fraud detection solutions. They're using AI, they say, to identify patterns indicative of spam calls and SMS messages originating or terminating on their network.
Okay.
And they've developed technology to scan for malicious links, not just in SMS, but across popular platforms like WhatsApp, Telegram, Facebook, and Instagram, at least for traffic passing through their network.
So the aim is to automatically protect you if you're an Airtel customer or using their Wi-Fi.
That's the stated goal, to provide that layer of security automatically by default. Their leadership, specifically Gopal Vittal, has been very vocal about the threat. He sent out detailed communications like emails to customers.
I think I remember seeing one of those.
Yeah, warning people about the increasing sophistication of scams, describing them as highly organized operations targeting users across multiple channels, calls, texts, social media, the works.
And you can sometimes see them trying to flag suspicious messages directly, right? Adding little scam likely disclaimers or something.
Exactly. They're adding those kinds of warnings. So they're definitely building their own fortifications. However,
Yes, not enough on its own.
as they themselves seem to implicitly acknowledge by proposing the alliance, these individual efforts can only go so far. As long as scammers can exploit that lack of coordination between providers, there will always be gaps in the defense that criminals will find and slip through.
Which brings us back to the need for that unified approach.
Precisely. A unified approach is probably the only way to truly close those gaps effectively.
And this isn't just about protecting individual consumers from losing money, is it? There feels like a bigger, almost national security dimension here as well.
You're absolutely right. That angle is becoming increasingly prominent. The main industry body, the Cellular Operators Association of India, KIO-AI, which represents the TSPs,
Okay.
they've been pushing the government really hard on this. Specifically, they're urging regulators to bring the big over-the-top or OTT platforms, think WhatsApp, Telegram, Signal, under a similar regulatory framework as the traditional telecom services.
And what's their core argument for doing that?
Their argument is that these platforms have become major hubs, even breeding grounds, for cyber fraud and other illegal activities, precisely because there's currently less accountability and oversight compared to the TSPs.
Easier for scammers to operate there.
Much easier, they argue. Scammers can launch mass phishing attacks, run fraudulent campaigns, coordinate illegal activities relatively easily via these encrypted apps. And the telecom companies whose networks are being used to carry this traffic have limited tools to stop activity happening on these third-party platforms.
So COAI sees this as a serious gap.
They've explicitly framed the lack of regulatory parity and oversight on OTTs as a potential national security threat. They argue it makes it incredibly hard to curb spam, scams, and other illegal content effectively.
So even with things like TRAI's mandate for TSPs to trace messages that started November 1, 2024, right?
Right.
If scammers just switch to WhatsApp or Telegram.
Exactly. That traceability mandate, while an important step for traditional SMS, is less effective if the criminals can simply migrate their operations onto end-to-end encrypted OTT platforms where tracing is technically much harder or impossible without the platform's cooperation.
Which those platforms are often reluctant to give, citing user privacy.
Right. It's a complex issue. But this proposed Joint Telecom Fraud Initiative, if it happens, could work in tandem with those regulatory efforts. It's about building a more comprehensive defense system.
How so?
By sharing intelligence about the source of fraudulent traffic, IP addresses, device identifiers, patterns, maybe they can better block the network access for these bad actors, regardless of whether they're using SMS, voice calls, or data sessions for OTT apps. It's about creating walls around the entire digital landscape, not just patching holes in one part of it.
Okay, so looking ahead then, what's the path forward for this initiative? Will Geo and V actually sign on? What's the latest?
That is the multi-billion-dollar question, isn't it? The entire success of this hinges completely on getting both Geo and V actively on board with Airtel. As of today, May 25, 2025, we haven't seen any public confirmation or commitment from either Geo or V saying, yes, we're in.
So it's still very much a proposal on the table.
Exactly. It's being discussed, evaluated, no doubt, but it's not a done deal by any means.
The stakes feel huge, though. For consumers, for everyone using a phone in India.
They really are. And it still is. If this alliance does happen and actually succeeds in its goals, the potential benefits for you, the user, could be massive.
Like what, specifically?
A significantly safer digital experience overall, a dramatic reduction in those incredibly annoying and often dangerous spam calls and texts, and, crucially, a much lower risk of falling victim to those increasingly sophisticated scam links that can empty your bank account.
That would be a huge relief for millions.
Absolutely. And beyond India, if they pull this off, it could actually set a global precedent, a model for how telecom rivals in other countries could collaborate to protect users from the rising tide of cybercrime.
But those potential drawbacks and hurdles we talked about are still very real.
Very real. The possibility of higher costs somehow getting passed on to consumers eventually, the incredibly complex privacy concerns around sharing potentially sensitive data, and that lingering fundamental question, can these longtime rivals truly maintain the trust and cooperation needed to make this work effectively over the long haul, or will old habits die hard?
These are the critical factors that will decide if this moves from a bold proposal to a functioning reality.
Exactly. And if it doesn't gain full traction, or if it gets bogged down by those challenges, well, the scammers will likely just continue to exploit the very gaps this initiative is designed to close. Business as usual for them, unfortunately.
So, wrapping this up, what does all of this swirling activity, this potential truce, mean for you, the person actually holding the phone day to day?
Well, while these telecom titans figure out if they can truly set aside decades of intense rivalry for the common good, you are still very much on the front lines of this escalating cyber war. Protection starts with you.
And here's where it gets really interesting. That personal defense is absolutely critical right now, maybe more than ever.
Totally. Be incredibly skeptical of suspicious links, no matter where they appear. SMS, WhatsApp, email, anywhere. If you receive a communication that looks official from your bank, a government agency, an online store, always verify it independently. Go directly to their official website by typing the address yourself, or call them using a phone number you know is legitimate, not one provided in the suspicious message itself. Never click links or call numbers from a message you weren't expecting or that feels off.
Basic digital hygiene, but so important.
Absolutely. Keep all your software updated, your phone's OS, your apps. Use strong, unique passwords for different accounts. And importantly, report scams when you see them.
Why is reporting so important?
Report them to your telecom provider. Use the government's National Cybercrime Reporting Portal. Your reports, even if you didn't fall victim, provide crucial data points. They help build the intelligence picture that these companies individually or collectively need to identify and block these fraudsters. You're part of the solution.
This deep dive really reveals a potential turning point, doesn't it? A possible shift from relentless individual competition towards maybe, just maybe, a unified defense against a common, pervasive threat.
It does. The critical question looming large is, can they actually build that digital fortress together? Or will the powerful history of rivalry, the logistical hurdles, the trust issues ultimately prove too strong to overcome?
It's a fascinating and incredibly important moment unfolding in the Indian digital landscape.
It really is.
And just thinking about this whole situation, it makes you wonder, doesn't it? If companies known for such cutthroat competition can potentially find common ground to fight something as complex as cybercrime, what other massive, seemingly intractable challenges facing society might suddenly become more solvable if traditional rivals decided to unite, just maybe, for a greater collective good?
That's a really interesting thought to leave people with. What else becomes possible? Definitely something to chew on.